Hey there you lot, thanks for clicking. Welcome back to Fat Glenn's Fish. Today's video I am going to be stripping and pulling down this tank behind me. This is my Frontosa tank and I've got a few random Lake Malawis up here, including some Malawi Barracuda. I'm hoping to get some results out of both those species today, and I'm going to show you how I go about that on the other side. See you in a minute. So this is a job that I invariably procrastinate on. A, because it's a bit of a hard job. It's a big tank, and because it's a big tank, it has to go on the top shelf, and therefore it's, at my age, getting to be more and more of a job to be up and down a ladder dealing with this. The other reason I often procrastinate about it is that because I'm running a couple of species in here to try and get better bang for buck out of real estate, it often happens that I'll have a Frontosa holding that I know about, and I'm sort of planning towards getting onto that, and then you'll come out one day and kind of catch something else in the act. I believe we've got a definite fronty there holding, and I think I could have as many as 3 depending on who's hiding in the pipes at any given stage. But the reason I didn't do this the weekend or so ago based on the Frontosas was that we noticed a couple of the Malawi Barracuda are holding, and these these are something you don't see around too much anymore. And obviously I like to, I don't like to strip until I am confident that I'll be able to get a good result tumbling eggs, and usually I like to leave that at least a week from noticing, and that's kind of where we're at now. The other reason I start putting it off is, like, the Frontosa are bulletproof. There's no trouble with them holding and handling the whole process of me pulling the tank down. But one of the things I've learned about the Barracuda is that they can be a bit touchy in terms of spitting, and so I just end up sort of being afraid to take it on at the end point. But today's the day. I've got 3 or so hours up my sleeve and I've got to get onto this job. So enough talk, let's do it. This is a method that I've developed for this tank in particular, because this has always had Frontosas in it. Often when I'm breaking down a smaller tank, I'll be catching all my fish and doing a sort of a grading. So every time I go into a group where I'm harvesting fish, I'm also reassessing my colony balance, how many females I think I've got versus males, and it might be that I pull a fish or 2 out here and there, or I'm just possibly thinking, am I going to move these to a different tank? So I often set up and do this job with individual buckets for species, and that also becomes challenging with Frontosa, because Frontosa in buckets, think about the oxygen problem you're going to have. So I do this tank differently. And one of the important tools of trade is I've got a custom made fly screen, which I will use as a divider. And I'm going to start at one end of the tank to break this down, and basically the fish are all going to remain in the tank for this job, and we're going to get them to one end, and then as I'm sorting, I'm going to be flipping them over, and that way I don't miss any holding females. One of the challenges for me, being a bit visually impaired, is that I can't always just sort of look for the fish I'm after and get a catch. So this is the method I've gone with. It's a bit time consuming, but if you're doing it on a sort of about a 3 weekly basis, which is what I found is a good number to go into tanks for, sorry, my microphone always wants to be upside down. About every 3 weeks I do this job, and this is how we roll. Down behind me here I've got a big black tub, and we're going to start taking out all these terracotta pipes into the tub. I like using the tub for a couple of reasons. One, invariably a bit of sand comes out with these pipes and that makes a big mess on your floor. But the other thing is that sometimes bristlenose catfish or plecos will hang on for dear life, and unfortunately I've stood on a few bristles over the years on my floor, which is always a bit sad. But if I put the pipes into a tub, invariably the bristlenose will be in the tub and I get a second crack at them. The other thing I've got down here is just a big old bucket for my sponge filters, and I'm not sure whether you've caught up yet, but I did a major video on my thoughts regarding sponge filters recently, so I wouldn't mind if you could go and have at least a partial look at that. You might be surprised to see me running sponges as the primary filtration with Frontosa, but as we're hopefully going to see shortly, it can be very successful. So by starting at one end, all I'm doing here is I'm going to gather up a couple of my bristlenose tunnels into a tub of water, because I'm going to be doing a major water change while I'm at this, obviously. And then part of my process with that is that I will be agitating all this sand. The Frontosas are a big fish. I'm putting a lot of food in, and part of that, that's a messy business, and I want to give this sand all a good wash and clean while I'm at it. I put this little internal sponge filter in here, internal power filter in here recently, and they do continue to knock it off. The suction cups aren't great on this little one, so I've got to come up with a little plan for a better means of fixing that. But by starting at one end, I've already got the fish, going down that end to avoid any trouble that's coming. I'm happy for some of these incidental fish to be down there. I'm primarily just wanting to get all my Frontosas at this end, and we've now got, I'll put my screen in the wrong way. I've now got the majority of the fish trapped in what is now sort of 2.5 feet of tank. What I like to do at this stage is to start draining the tank, because when you're netting fish out of deeper tanks, if they decide for whatever reason they're going to take a run up the corner, they're going to have all that extra depth of water to get some momentum up, and the last thing I want to be doing is launching Frontosas from near on 6 feet in the air down onto the floor. But I don't want to drain it so deep that the fish start to totally freak out either. The other thing I'm going to use my ice cream container with bristlenose in is to start removing all this plant matter that I have in here. I try and run the plant in as many tanks as possible for what I call secondary filtration. I use this as a means of dealing with nitrate, because I do less water changes than probably the purists would advise. But what you'll notice is that plant, pretty bloody solid plant, and that kind of tells me when things are starting to happen with nitrate that, all right, maybe we've got to do a water change pretty soon. It's also a chance to throw a little bit into other tanks when you've got a lot in one tank. I can share the love around a little bit and know that I'm getting that benefit into some of my other tanks. Now I'm just going to try and get my filter out carefully. I'm just very, oh dear. That's the exact scenario I discussed in my video on the sponge filters, where this is one that I made poorly and the filters just dropped off, and now all my K1 is trying to launch out into that tank, which is what we call in the trade a giant pain in the arse. I've got a bad habit of piling everything in under where my taps are. Alright, so I've got this down now to about 2/3 of depth. Unfortunately, we're a little bit spatially impeded here. In fact, I might just stop and set the camera up again. Alright, so just going to break in and film on my other camera, the phone. So this is where we're at now. We've got pretty much everybody down one end. Now I don't want to spend too long at this point, obviously, because we've now got fish in a confined little corner, and the last thing I want is to sort of start freaking these fish out, because as I've mentioned, the barracuda in particular are touchy, and if one of these Frontosas happens to spook and sort of clatter into one, I'm pretty confident they won't be holding for longer. And whilst there's a chance that I can still salvage some fish from that scenario, it's obviously much better if I can keep Mum holding right until I get her into that tub. So on that, I will get up the ladder and get on with it. So I'm now set up and ready to start catching some fish. I've got a little vessel of water here, which if I catch a fish that's holding, I'm going to be stripping straight into this. It's obviously not ideal being up a ladder doing this. I'm hoping I don't drop one. What I want to do though, I don't want to spook these fish. At the moment they're still relatively peaceful. I'm going to try and just start picking fish out one or two at a time. I don't want a lot of fish in the net at once, because the Frontosas are a powerful fish, and if they start flapping about, they do buffet whoever else is in the net. Ideally, I'm going to pick out a few things that are incidental, although you've got to read the room a bit. And sometimes somebody will just swim into a net for you beautifully and present. In my experience, the Frontosas are particularly good holders. I can't tell whether that's got eggs by visually seeing it, but I just know that this girl has got her By the way, one way I've learned to hold the Frontosas is to use that sort of hump on the front to your advantage. And I check all the Frontosas that have their mouths shut purely because even small fronties have, I've noticed they have a tendency to sometimes swim around holding substrate in their mouth, and I don't know whether that's a way of trying to bluff a male into thinking that they're holding. I'll get some overhead of this because I'm trying to film this all by myself, I can't, but we've just got a nice mouthful of eggs there. There's probably 30 that I'd say are a week old. What I like to do is I set up a heap of these containers ahead of time so that I can strip one fish per, and that obviously I don't want to mix fry with eggs if I don't have to. That's just more sorting later. So yeah, just gradually, just slow and steady wins this race. We just line up a fish that's angled nicely for the net. We've got a couple of stray fish in here that are just in here growing on. I've got a few yellowfin mulatto in this tank. I've got some Nasuta capillis, which I'm desperately trying to breed and unable to at this time. And I'm just flipping these, probably you can't see it, but I'm flipping them over the screen into the big part of the tank, which is a sign of checked. She's not holding. I'll just get that filter out of the way that fell off before. You'll hear people talk about you shouldn't strip fish, blah blah blah, and and that they'll eventually no longer hold. These fish have been worked with many times over, and as you can see, they're kind of behaving themselves. This girl's got her mouth clamped shut pretty hard. This poor thing, she's hung on a long time. These are beautiful little free swimmers ready to rock and roll. And the interesting thing is I can feel she's lost a bit of condition, but not massively so. I do wonder whether they can actually sneak a little bit of food while they're holding. We've probably got 20 or so in there. So that's a good start on the fronties. Right, now this might be interesting. We've got a Barracuda in the net this time, amongst others. So I've got a net full of fish here, which, as I mentioned earlier, is not ideal. And I have a big mess because, sure enough, the Barracuda has spat. I'm going to try and quickly strip her completely. Wowzers. And what I've now got to be careful of is, as you can see, I've got other fish in this net that are now possibly got baby fish stuck to them and so on. So I'm trying hard to... This is, I think, my male Barracuda. You can see the lovely colour in the ventral fins. Ramphicromus chillingali. Not the biggest of the genus. And what I'm just going to do is quickly get everything down to the bottom of my net, invert and rinse. Wow, so we're off to a good start. I'm going to pause because my camera gets a bit hot and it will just shut itself off randomly. So back in a minute. Righto, let's crack on a bit more. I've been watching a lot of the Florida exotic fish sales videos on YouTube lately, and I envy the way they go about it, but with they net the whole colony. But I do wonder how many fish he loses with the big nets that they use and fry spitting in the nets. We've got a young girl here that I'm pretty confident is holding. And I'm right, we've got some more eggs, which is fantastic because I thought I might have had 3 Frontosas holding maybe, but now we've confirmed that. So that's so far 3 Fronties and 1 Barracuda that we've stripped. And it's probably about time to start pulling a few more of these pipes out. And it's just slow and steady movements always, guys. Like, you've probably seen that, you know, the Fronties, I won't say they're trained, but they're not surprised by what I'm doing here. And I'm just not lunging at them with nets, and so far I'm pretty pleased that we've, especially got that first Barracuda out without mishap. We'll start to get a bit of mess. You've got to try and gauge which way the fish are in the tank sometimes, in the pipe, because you don't want to be trying to tip a big Frontosa out against the grain with its dorsals. And last one. Rightio. Sometimes they make it pretty apparent that they're not holding. And I'd like to, you notice that Frontosa hitting speed. I like to try and get them out of the water before they get the chance to do that, because they're not going to get the ability to launch. But also I feel like that would be a sign of panic, which would put more panic through the rest of the mob. Got a few of our incidental fish here to move across. I don't think there's anything in here. There's a few random brown peacocks in here that I was unable to identify, which I put up here just as dither originally, until I decided to put the Barracuda in, funnily enough. Righto, we might be on to another one here. Obviously this duckweed isn't ideal at this time, it can be a bit messy, but as I've stipulated, like, I just think the benefits of that plant matter as filtration, refuge, food. It's a pain to work around at this time, but that's the only time it's a pain for me. More eggs. Eggs. What I'm going to do is just, because these are pretty similar for stage of development, I'll be tumbling them together, so we'll save our containers. So I think that's now 4 fronties, and that might be about it for them. It's a small one that's not. I don't know, maybe we do have another one here. And as you can see, like, as I said, these fish have been handled many times over. These are probably 3 or 4 years old, regular breeders. And once they give that initial kick in the net, they generally lie there pretty passively. It doesn't mean you relax and let them flop their way out of your hand. Okay, so that's one where I misread. She looked a bit puffy under there, but nothing to show, which doesn't surprise me. Gonna try and get the big boy out. So this is our dominant male. Beautiful big boy, good hump, and not overly aggressive. I've had a few fronties in the past that have been a handful. He was, until I took out the subdominant male, and he seems to have mellowed since that happened. It's getting a bit harder now because the fish are starting to accumulate, wanting to get towards the big mob. And I think this is our barracuda that's holding here still, so thankfully I haven't disturbed her yet. Whoops. That's not what we want. Luckily that's landed on the top shelf. That's a white calvus that nearly hit the deck. I have just got a barracuda there, but I feel like maybe she had been holding and I might have gone a bit long. She's quite skinny, she's a bit puffy in the throat, which is a sign that she's probably been holding and I've missed. But pretty cool little fish. Not sexy for colour, but certainly body shape. Nothing like them, and they, despite the name, the barracuda, they're not a particularly nasty beast. Righto, I'm going to try my best to get this one now, or we might call it quits on the filming after that, because you can only watch so many of these, I would imagine. Just waiting for her to turn, and we'll get rid of our random peacock. Now I'm starting to starting to think that, yeah, we've got some fry there, but I'm worried now that maybe she's spat a few out in the tank. Alright, so that's the messy part of the job done. I'll flip off now and we'll get some footage of what I've captured here in a tick. So here's our Frontosa eggs. That's from, I think I stripped three females to get eggs, all at a very comparable stage of development, so I'm going to tumble those together. If you're bored, count them and put it in the comments below. I'm going to just guess at hopefully upwards of 70 there, which is fantastic. And over here are the little Barracuda, and I did, because I was filming up a ladder trying to do all sorts of things, managed to mix up the second Frontosa I stripped that had 3 swimmers. That's them sitting in a little clump down the back. They are kind of cute when you first strip. They often just sit in a ball because that's all they've been doing for their small number of days on Earth. Little Barracuda, pretty good. I think there might be one there that got kind of nicked on the way out, and one of the little challenges with the Barracuda is sort of when to go. And I've stripped these early in the past, and the risk is because of their sharp teeth, I think they are you've got to be so careful trying to strip that they don't nick the eggs as you're washing them out, because once you scratch that little egg it's not going to do so well. But we've got a nice little yield here now, and I think I need to get some baby brine shrimp hatching, because I desperately want to get a good return on this effort. I've probably stripped half a dozen of these Barracuda over the journey, and I always end up with 2 or 3 fry. So I'm going to try and be a good boy and really put effort into feeding this time. Yeah, so good earn, 70 odd eggs plus maybe another 25 fronties here, so we're pushing 100 fronties, which is fantastic, and God knows how many little Barracuda. Super happy. Now I've got to get back to the shitty bit, and I'll be scrubbing glass and changing water, so I'll get a bit of footage at the end, eh? We'll wrap it up. See you then. Here we are, about an hour on from when I last spoke. I've done the not a great clean on my glass up here on the inside. I haven't cleaned outside yet at all. Haven't got my lids on yet, but fish are back in new water. I've just added salts, which is still going in. The cloudy mess drifting down. I do my own salts from scratch, and I promise I will finally get that video made this coming year, 2026, when I will talk to you about my thoughts on that. Fish are just kind of exploring the slightly altered layout, and I think they the fact that power internal filter had fallen in and hadn't actually been working for about 2 weeks. I think they're just refining their patch in the tank with the current running. So it's been a great outcome today. I will just give you one last little look down the side here. Our Frontosa eggs are tumbling around in the Similis tank. I don't necessarily tumble where they come from, but I do try and always tumble in tanks where I know I don't have a bristlenose, because I don't want to risk any issues with eggs being sucked through. I did get one pleasant surprise that if you remember at the beginning of the video, one of the first things I did was pull the bristlenose tunnels out, and when I came back to the tunnel we had little baby bristlenose going everywhere. I forgot to check the status of what was going on with my tunnels. My habit is to have that extra container ready for just such a purpose, so that was a good little bycatch. So we've ended up producing 3 species today. Once again, our little barracuda and the ready free swimming fronties, and a few little barracuda that still have a little bit of egg to absorb. I've got to get them tucked away nice somewhere, and it's been a good result. So I hope you got some benefit out of today, or some enjoyment. And if you got that enjoyment, I'd really appreciate if you could give it a like or tell a friend. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my channel, because I've made a concerted effort this last 6 months to put up some more regular content, and I think I'm running along at about 1 video per subscription, and I still notice when people unsubscribe. So it's a long, challenging prospect to put this out, and maybe I'm just on the wrong track, but hopefully you're here for the right reasons, and we'll see you again on the next one. I'll give an update on this on New Year's Eve, and that'll probably be me for the year. So look forward to seeing you back. Thanks for watching.